You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become an action figure. Here's a look at the brand new McFarlane Toys, DC Multiverse, The Dark Knight Trilogy, Two-Face. A prominent and well-educated district attorney, Harvey Dent, fought valiantly to uphold the law and make the city a better place. In any other city, it would have worked. Not in Gotham City, though, a place where greed and corruption stretched from the depths of Crime Alley to the shimmering heights of the mayor's office. Dent's spiral into Gotham City's madness came swiftly after a criminal threw acid into his face, leaving half of it horribly scarred. Seeking refuge in the underbelly of Gotham, the name Harvey Dent and all that the good stood for was lost, and Two-Face rose from the darkness. By the way, before we begin, do you know how Two-Face likes to take his coffee? With half and half. That's horrible. Before, though, we get a closer look, though, at Two-Face, let me first throw out a thank you to the folks over at McFarlane Toys. Yes, that did provide this sample of the brand new Two-Face that we could have a look at in this review. Getting the tape measure all aligned here, the figure stands about 6 3/4 of an inch tall, or Two-Face stands about 17 centimeters in height. As for your size comparisons, though, we'll slide over Harvey and we'll bring in Batman. I did want to bring in Batman, obviously, because it's the only other figure we've looked at so far in this wave, but also just to show you as well that they're not that much different in height. Two-Face, though, has some tough time standing. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. But when it certainly comes to their heights, the figures are really close in size, Batman only being a tad bit taller because of the points on the tops of his cowl. Though I wouldn't consider an accessory for Two-Face, the figure does come included still with the severed stump of Bane. He's missing his arms, he's missing his head, and of course he's missing his lower legs. We can at least fix the problems down below here. We're going to have to fix the problems with these in future reviews. One thing I did want to mention, though, about the Bane is taking him out of the packaging. One of the little ringlets came off here. I guess if you wanted to have yourself a little finger ring, you could use that for that. But make sure when you are taking this out of the packaging, oh, I just dropped it. Making sure you don't just do what I just did. When you're taking it out of the packaging, make sure that that socket joint, it's not really even the socket, it's the part that actually hides the joint, doesn't fall off the side of the figure. Because again, when I took it out of the tray first, this one did fall off, now just fell onto the floor. I'm going to have to go retrieve that before I finish building the rest of the Bane. But we at least can get some progress being made. I do have the lower legs here that came included with Batman. He does have, the softer, not skirting, but he has the softer lower torso here. So that's going to make things a little bit more difficult when it comes to putting his legs in. So I'd have to get it inside there, making sure, of course, you had the feet going the right way, which I do, and then just plug that in. I may not succeed right away doing this right now, but I may have to do this off camera. Sometimes it may involve even having to heat the socket right here, and then force the legs in place. But actually, it seems like the legs are holding pretty good. Just to put it down over top of Harvey Dent's trading card. I did want to show you at least what it looks like along with Harvey. I think, though, in the movie, Bane would have been about the same size as Aaron Eckhart's, Tom Hardy, that is. He is a little bit bigger when it comes to the figures, but again, if you're going to be building a figure of Bane, I guess you'd like to think that the figure is going to be a little bit bigger than all the other figures that make up that wave. Boy, that was long-winded. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and put that to the side. I'm going to have to go retrieve that socket, that little part that fell off the side of his torso. We're going to put that to the side. Let's get down to looking at the things at least that come included specifically for Two-Face. One thing I'm happy to report, though, is that once again, like the Batman we looked at before, though I am still kind of questioning the trading card. I'm looking at it, and it kind of does look like he has an elbow joint there like you would see on the figure, but the cape obviously has been digitally altered. That, though, the more I'm looking at it, does look like the Dark Knight Rises suit or Dark Knight suit. But one thing I'm happy to see is that they did actually use a source material. Not necessarily, though, of Two-Face, but Aaron Eckhart playing Harvey Dent. While he's still believing, of course, in himself before he gets scarred to the side. And, while we're on the topic of scarring Two-Face, if you look at the back of the card, it was the same thing I read at the beginning of the review. About halfway here, about here is where I was saying this. You guys probably started scratching your head. Wait a minute. Dent's spiral into Gotham City's madness came swiftly after a criminal threw acid in his face? That didn't happen. Technically, no, it didn't happen. It happened in the comics, and it's happened in most of the origin stories of Two-Face. Well, not technically the Batman animated series. A vat exploded on the side while Harvey Dent was running along a scaffold. But in this case, actually, I wonder if this was originally used in the script, and maybe they had pulled the passage from the script read-up of what would have happened with Two-Face, or they just decided that they wanted to have the origin of Two-Face being acid-related. because they did make some changes with the Nolan trilogy. Dark Knight, I believe, at the very end, Two-Face was only going to be introduced at the very end where he walks into the bar and they said, "Harvey, I thought you were dead." And he says, "Half." That apparently was the original script idea, which would then lead into the third movie where Two-Face was going to play more of the predominant role. Of course, that never ended up happening. So again, rather interesting the fact that McFarlane's team decided to use that as the read-up for Two-Face. Makes things rather interesting. We're going to move that to the side. The figure, of course, does come included with a display stand as well. Same display stand that we've already had a look at Batman with the DC logo sizzled down below. And of course, you got the DC logo, well, DC peg further up from the logo that you can plug into the underside of Aaron Eckhart or Harvey Dent's feet. I would certainly say use this. Don't lose this. Well, if you have extras of these, it won't really matter. But I did notice specifically with Two-Face that his feet do have a harder time to stand. I don't know really exactly the reasoning why they have a harder time. We're going to get back to these tiny little piggies in a second, but first let's move up to Two-Face's face, both of them at least, so you guys can see the detail work that McFarlane's team sculpted into the figure. All in all, it's a nice looking figure. To the side, it does bear, if you were to look at this more of a cartoonier looking version of Aaron Eckhart's Two-Face or Harvey Dent, I think it does a pretty good job of looking like Two-Face. The side, of course, that's scarred. Now, while it is very disfigured, I would say at least the paint looks a little bit too burnt around this area of his face. Now, of course, his scarring does progress as the movie also progresses after he's first revealed. But I think I probably would have not had the face as dark as it is right here. This does work well, the way that they've got sort of a two-tone effect of more of the skin tone, and then you've got the really more rosier red that's painted in there as well. I like the fact that they did add the scarring here, the scabbing to the back, but I feel like almost there's maybe too much scabbing here on the front of his face. It's a good-looking face, though. Really well handled, especially when it came to the paint. Now, Two-Face in the movie does not actually have a real divide when it comes to his suit. In the comics, of course, he'd really play it up on the one side being, again, really more outlandish, the other side being more formal. In the movie, in fact, they kind of write this off as he literally is just laying down in gasoline. And then when eventually that does blow up, this is the part that burns the side of his face. Apparently, this would be the end result of his jacket. I think it would be a lot more tattered than this, but it sort of leaves behind this sort of reddish crimson color kind of embedded into the fabric material of the jacket. It's kind of interesting the way that they design that. Now, the jacket itself is a softer plastic, but it looks like they've actually attached it to the top of his torso. While it's softer down here, you really can't remove the jacket, and obviously you can't. He has scarring only just a little bit on this one side. I wish that they probably would have added just a little bit more of it. He gets it down below in the forearm, but I don't think he gets nearly enough of that here on the tops of his shoulders. He has a lot of it here, and he has a fair bit here, but I think they should have added just a little bit here to the tops of his arms as well. Obviously, this side isn't the side that has the most damage. This is the more cleaner side. And again, like his arms are very symmetrical in the way that they're designed, other than, again, like this has a little bit more scarring. This does not. One thing also on this side of his body does have the now famous coin. The coin you can see, I don't know if you can actually see, it does have sculpted faces, although they're actually more just shapes than anything else. You can't quite make out finer features on the face. The coin is not removable. And while I do think that having a non-removable coin was probably the better bet, because of course if you're going to be putting a small coin in any figure's hands, there's likelihood. I've already dropped the socket joint for poor Bane's torso. Can you imagine what I would have done with a tiny little coin like this? But I think if anything, they probably could have included a secondary hand. Then you could have popped this off, replaced it with just a regular gripping hand. I probably could easily find a hand in part of my other figures. I probably have some loose hands kicking around. Now, one thing that's also interesting while we're on the topic of hands is while this one is holding a coin clearly, this one looks like it's designed to be holding a pistol. Now, obviously, they can't be using any pistols right now when it comes to packing along with figures, so I'm going to have to see if I can find myself a gun maybe from another figure. That's one of the benefits, at least, of collecting this line as long as I have. I'm probably sure I could find myself a little gun small enough for Two-Face, of course, to be holding in his other hand, because clearly he does have a trigger-firing finger designated for a gun. Decently detailed overall. Again, he's got the nice striped coloring of his tie, alternating colors of a lighter and darker red. The tie itself is also a softer plastic. What's rather interesting, though, is they've actually embedded it actually into the top of the torso. I just assumed, taking the figure out of the plastic prison first, that it was just glued in place. But actually, they have allotted a little slot here. You can see the way I'm lifting it up. It kind of looks like a tongue. That's probably all you guys are going to be able to see now. But I guess they did do that so there's going to be a little bit more of durability to the tie, especially when it comes to the articulation of the figure. Lower down from that, again, you got the texturing of the pants. The pants aren't quite the same coloring as his jacket. His jacket actually has slightly more of a greenish tint to the gray, where down below you got more of a darker gray, or a darker black almost. Some nice texturing, though, that they've done to the actual surface of the plastic. And again, down below he's got his footwear here. Like, what's rather interesting is that his feet, his shoes that he wears, didn't look like they got burned at all. I would have probably scorched this side too. But I already mentioned the figure does have peg holes on the undersides of his feet. Now, I did mention earlier that the figure does have some tough time to stand, and I can't really figure out why. He has a hinge joint for all intents and purposes that allow the feet to move up and down this way, and of course you still have the ankle pivot. But for one reason or another, when I get this guy to stand, he seems to always want to lean forward. I guess if you bend the knees just a little bit, that's probably enough to compensate for it, and then Two-Face won't take a tumble. For the figure's articulation, picking the figure up again, posability-wise, the figure does have a good, decent amount of articulation with a ball joint that he has afforded in his head. You rotate it all the way around, the figure does look up only by about that much, does look also down that much, and rocks it back and forth as well. I can't imagine the pain this guy would be going through in the movie. I mean, the fact that he does have visible bone, he has visible bone sticking out the bottom of his chin, that's got to be painful, and he didn't want any pain medication either. Upper torso is on a good, generous ball joint. Again, he does have a lower abdomen ball joint as well. The arms do hinge out. No problems at all here with the arms either. You can easily bring the arms out 90 degrees. You take those arms and rotate them all the way around. Figure does have a bicep swivel. Double hinge once again on the elbows, and the hands rotate all the way around, and there's a little hinge in there also as well. Legs do split, once again, with a ratcheted joint in the insides of the thighs. Why do we continue to look at that part, always in this part of the posability? But the legs do move forward. Again, you've got that softer, lower abdomen, or lower waist area here. Like, it's all soft plastic, certainly to help to conceal the joint on the tops of his thighs. Some people would say that looks a little bit more like a diaper, but, you know, again, like as I already mentioned with the review of the Batman, like the continuation, the shape, the form that they put into these, they look less baggy, I've noticed, as of late, and they look a little bit more seamless to the rest of the figure's legs. You can see how it's just a continuation. There's nothing really bulging out here when it comes to the actually the tops of the pants here. There's no additional baggage at all. But again, like, the legs do split. You can take the legs and you can move them forward. You can move them back. The mild swivel at the top of the thigh, a double hinge on the knee once again. And again, you've got the articulation already mentioned. Ankle articulation is up and down. Ankle articulation is back and forth. And he also has the toe articulation as well. The only thing I would have said for Two-Face is obviously the overlooked pistol. I would have loved it. This guy could have come included with the pistol. I can fix that. The only other thing I would say is, like, the scabbing that he has on the side of his face, I think is a little bit too predominant. I'm just bringing in, by the way, Batman. So you guys can see the difference again before we wrap things up and jump over to the rotisserie. But I like the look of Two-Face. Overall, I like the look of Two-Face. The only thing I probably would have done differently is pulled back some of the darker colors that they put on his face. I think, again, it works okay more to the top of his temple. But I think around the front of his face, I think it's just a little bit too dark. But overall, again, job well done by the folks over at McFarlane Toys. Something I find rather ironic as we're wrapping up things here in final looks for Two-Face is that we're 2 for 2, similar to the two sides of Two-Face's body. We're 2 for 2 for dropping things to the floor, and luckily the black hole hasn't claimed either one of those things. I was finally then able to retrieve the socket joint, or the part of the joint that conceals the shoulder section for Bane, so he's all good to go, and he's ready to get himself the arms, likely for the Scarecrow that we will be looking at in the upcoming review. Here, though, in wrapping up in the final looks of Two-Face, overall, again, a nice-looking figure. Short of maybe just including a secondary hand that wouldn't have not had a coin in his hand, and, of course, including a pistol. I know a pistol or a gun would be hard-pressed now to include with these figures, but I guess if you already have a lot of your DC Multiverse figures that you've been collecting from the folks over at McFarlane Toys, likelihood is you probably could go to a Red Hood or any one of the older figures and get yourself a gun or a handgun pistol along those lines and display along with the figure. That's likely what I'm going to end up doing here when it comes to releasing or displaying Two-Face on my shelf. The only other things short of those two things that I mentioned, two things, there we go, talking about two again, is that the scarring on the face, again, is a little predominant. I couldn't help but also notice, you may even notice it for yourself, that the jacket is a little off color to the rest of the pants that he has below. I think in the movie they're a little bit more closer in color. For one reason or another, they decided to add a more greenish tint to it. I do like that they at least scarred the jacket. whether that's believable or not. I think if you fall in gasoline and that lights up, I'm pretty sure it's not just going to leave red behind. It's probably just going to singe the entire fabric off your body and burn your body in the process. Well, Two-Face is already burned, so I guess he wasn't able to get away from that one, at least. Overall, again, nice looking figure. The biggest one, I think, is just the scarring on his face. If they just made it a little bit more of that reddish color and less the darker black, I think we'd be good to go with a good looking Two-Face. But overall, it's still a nice looking figure. I am very excited to have a look at the Scarecrow, and we are going to be looking again at the Heath Ledger Joker. And then from there, we're going to be wrapping ourselves up a Bane. Might even just leave him for a separate review. Overall, though, what do you guys think of Two-Face? 50-50? Good or bad? Let me know down below in the comment section how many more analogies we're going to use for Two-Face. Seriously, what do you guys think of the Two-Face figure? Let me know down below in the comment section. And once again, I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide the sample of the new Dark Knight Trilogy Two-Face. We can have a look at this review. If you guys, speaking of which, did enjoy this review, why not throw it a like? If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and certainly on board to see more, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and turn on the bell notification. Of course, we are going to be looking at Scarecrow, already mentioned. We are going to be looking at the Heath Ledger Joker, already mentioned. And we are going to be looking at the Bane, assumed to be mentioned. So there's going to definitely be a lot more videos coming your way, guys. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.